December 16, 1944. Hurtgen Forest, Germany. Snow lay heavy across the dense pines, muffling the footsteps of soldiers moving through a landscape that felt more like a frozen tomb than a battlefield. The air was sharp and metallic, carrying the scent of cordite, pine sap, and the faint, bitter tang of fear. Branches bent under ice, cracking silently as patrols slipped between them, unaware of the eyes watching from above. In a shell-pocked clearing, a single American sniper crouched behind the twisted remains of a fallen tree. His rifle was unconventional, its scope mounted backward, a crude adaptation born from necessity, nicknamed the wrong side scope. Most men would have discarded the broken instrument, yet he had turned it into a weapon of precision. Every German patrol moving through the forest would soon discover that his aim was unnervingly accurate, his shots appearing out of nowhere. Around him, frost clung to boots and gloves, but his hands were steady. He adjusted the scope's bizarre alignment with care, silently measuring distance, wind, and angle. Each breath was controlled, each heartbeat deliberate. In the dense, frozen forest, he was both hunter and guardian, invisible, relentless, and lethal. The first German scout would vanish without a sound, and with him, the myth of a rifle turned legend would quietly begin. December 1944 found the Western Front in chaos. Hitler's Ardennes offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge, had launched suddenly, catching the Allies by surprise. American units, spread thin across the forested border between Belgium and Germany, were forced into defensive positions in terrain that favored the attacker as little as it favored the defender. Hurtgen Forest, with its dense pine trees, icy streams, and rocky gullies, was a nightmare for conventional warfare. Roads were narrow and covered with snow. Artillery fire echoed like thunder through valleys, and visibility was often limited to mere yards. The 9th Infantry Division, alongside elements of the 1st Infantry Division, had been assigned to hold positions along the forest's eastern edge. German forces, seasoned by years of brutal campaigns on the Eastern Front, advanced in platoons, scouts probing through the undergrowth, their steps silent but deliberate. The Americans were on alert for any movement, knowing that one misstep could lead to annihilation. Equipment shortages made the situation even more dire. Cold temperatures froze lubricants, caused rifles to jam, and cracked scopes. Optics, essential for accuracy at long range, were particularly vulnerable. Soldiers learned quickly that standard sighting methods could fail without warning. Ammunition was rationed, and supply convoys risked ambush on icy forest roads. Every bullet mattered, every patrol could change the outcome of a skirmish, and every improvised solution became invaluable. Within this environment, sharpshooters gained an outsized significance. The forest favored stealth, concealment, and patience, qualities that a skilled sniper could exploit. German patrols, confident and methodical, were often unaware that unseen eyes tracked their movement. The dense cover amplified the impact of a single shot, turning one man's skill into a tactical multiplier. Training emphasized field improvisation. Soldiers were taught to adjust to damaged equipment, to account for wind and temperature, and to estimate distance without optical aid. Still, nothing prepared them for the extreme conditions of Hurtgen. Standard rifle scopes fogged instantly, cracked under frost, or fell out of alignment when rifles were dropped. In this context, ingenuity became as critical as marksmanship. The sniper at the center of this story faced such a dilemma. His rifle's scope had been damaged during a previous skirmish, leaving him unable to use traditional optics. Yet the forest demanded accuracy. Every German patrol approaching their positions could exploit even a single hesitation. Discarding the rifle was not an option. Instead, he adapted. By inverting the scope, mounting it backward on the rifle, and recalibrating his aim through careful adjustment and repeated testing, he created what would come to be called the wrong side scope. Though unconventional and seemingly impossible, this modification allowed him to regain accuracy over long distances without a functional optical sight. It was crude, but it worked. The wider context of Hurtgen made his invention all the more essential. The forest's narrow trails were natural funnels for German reconnaissance teams. Mines, wire, and artillery restricted movement, forcing patrols to take predictable paths. Each step became an opportunity, if the defenders had the means to capitalize on it. And with the wrong side scope, this anonymous sniper could do precisely that, turning a broken rifle into a force multiplier in an environment that punished every miscalculation. Beyond technology, the forest amplified the psychological impact of such innovations. German troops would vanish seemingly without warning, leaving no trace and no explanation. Fear spread silently, eroding morale even before direct confrontation. In this way, one improvised weapon did more than fire bullets. It reshaped perception, controlling both space and imagination across the battlefield. By the eve of the first major engagements, the sniper had tested his adaptation repeatedly. The wrong side scope, once a desperate solution, became an extension of his instinct. He learned to account for parallax errors, wind drift, and distance estimation without relying on the conventional visual cues of a standard scope. Each adjustment honed his precision, turning the rifle into an instrument that could decide the fate of patrols, and, potentially, entire forest sectors. The conditions in Hurtgen, the scarcity of reliable equipment, and the peril of every patrol converged to make innovation a necessity. In this frozen, dense, and lethal environment, survival depended on more than training. It required invention, patience, and an understanding of the enemy that went beyond maps and manuals. The forest, silent and unyielding, had become a proving ground. Here, ingenuity mattered more than doctrine, and the wrong side scope would soon prove that even the simplest adaptation could alter the course of engagement. The tactical situation in Hurtgen Forest was unforgiving. Narrow trails wound between dense thickets and steep ravines. German engineers had mined key junctions, felled trees to block roads, and dug foxholes where they expected American positions. Visibility was often less than 50 meters, and any sound carried far in the icy air. For conventional units, progress was measured in meters rather than kilometers, and every patrol could spark a firefight that consumed hours of manpower and precious ammunition. American units were thinly spread. Infantry companies occupied isolated strongpoints, separated by wooded hills and frozen streams. Communication was difficult. Radios were unreliable in the dense forest. Soldiers relied on runners, hand signals, and prearranged schedules. Reinforcements were hours away, often blocked by snow or enemy fire. Each soldier knew that a lapse in vigilance could lead to encirclement, ambush, or death. Sharpshooters were therefore essential. A single sniper, armed with even a partially functional rifle, could delay entire enemy patrols. The forest's natural cover made it easy to conceal positions, and the terrain channeled German movement along predictable routes. Yet the challenges were extreme. Scopes could crack in the cold, optics fogged instantly, and rifles jammed after prolonged exposure to ice and mud. Even minor misalignment could make a shot miss by meters, enough for a patrol to survive and continue its advance. The sniper's wrong side scope addressed these limitations in an unconventional way. By mounting the damaged scope backward, he transformed its parallax characteristics. This forced him to recalibrate instinctively, compensating for magnification, inverted reticle alignment, and sight height over bore. Each shot required careful judgment of distance, wind, and angle, demanding a level of precision and patience beyond standard training. In essence, the improvised device became an extension of his awareness, merging adaptation with skill. The psychological environment of the forest also amplified the sniper's effect. German patrols moved confidently, unaware that they were being observed. When soldiers vanished suddenly, their comrades' fear spread faster than gunfire. Rumors circulated of unseen marksmen, of weapons that struck without warning, creating hesitation and forcing patrols to adopt overly cautious tactics. That hesitation, even if brief, bought American units crucial time to regroup, reinforce, or evacuate wounded. The terrain shaped every encounter. Slopes reduced lines of sight, frozen streams muffled sound, and tree trunks provided both cover and obstruction. Snipers needed to master these variables as much as they mastered their rifles. Standard doctrine emphasized observation points and pre-calculated fields of fire, but the forest was dynamic. Snowfall changed visibility hourly, and wind direction altered the drift of bullets. Improvisation, whether in positioning, calculation, or equipment adaptation, was essential. At the operational level, the forest was part of a larger German offensive aimed at splitting Allied forces and capturing key supply hubs. Success in Hurtgen would have allowed German units to threaten American lines further west, potentially altering the tempo of the Ardennes campaign. The stakes made every small engagement critical, and a single sniper who could render enemy patrols ineffective was disproportionately valuable. Furthermore, supply constraints added another layer of complexity. Food, ammunition, and medical supplies were limited. Soldiers faced frostbite, exhaustion, and hunger simultaneously. Equipment failures compounded the challenge. In this environment, conventional reliance on intact weapons and optics was a liability. Adaptation became a survival skill, and ingenuity, such as the wrong side scope, a lifeline. By December 18th, the sniper had established multiple firing positions along a ridge that overlooked a critical trail. His presence was invisible, his shots precise, and his understanding of both terrain and enemy behavior unmatched. German patrols began to vanish without explanation, unnerving units several kilometers away. The forest, already oppressive, now seemed alive with unseen eyes. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only marksmanship, but the full spectrum of battlefield adaptability. In a war increasingly dominated by technology and massed firepower, it was a simple, improvised scope that would prove decisive. In Hurtgen Forest, survival demanded more than courage. It required an almost meditative patience. The sniper spent hours frozen to a single position, his breath fogging in the icy air, his fingers numb around the rifle. Every movement risked detection. A snapped twig could alert the enemy, undoing hours of waiting. The psychological toll was immense. Soldiers described the silence of the forest as heavier than artillery fire. It pressed down on the chest, numbed the senses, and amplified fear. Yet, within this pressure, the sniper thrived. He learned to control heartbeats, to measure each inhalation, and to synchronize trigger pressure with the rhythm of his surroundings. The human element, mental discipline, and endurance became as critical as any mechanical advantage. It was not heroism in the cinematic sense. There were no cheers or grand gestures. There was only focus, calculation, and repetition. Each time the wrong side scope delivered a hit, it validated his trust in skill over circumstance, in ingenuity over limitation. Every vanishing patrol reinforced a quiet confidence that human resolve could shape the forest's deadly geometry. From a tactical perspective, the sniper's impact extended far beyond a single shot. Hurtgen's narrow trails channeled movement, turning patrols into predictable targets. One well-placed rifle could deny the enemy freedom of maneuver. By striking silently, repeatedly, and unpredictably, the sniper forced German patrols to adjust their paths, slow their advance, and expend caution that consumed time and morale. Commanders quickly noticed these effects. Units reported slower reconnaissance, hesitation among German squads, and unaccountable losses during routine scouting. These delays allowed American forces to reposition, reinforce key points, and evacuate casualties without direct confrontation. In a war often dictated by numbers and firepower, such tactical leverage was invaluable. The sniper's improvisation transformed a single rifle into a force multiplier. Whereas a standard marksman could eliminate a handful of soldiers per day, his unusual scope allowed him to hit targets at ranges and angles previously impossible under the constraints of damaged equipment. Each successful engagement amplified the defensive capacity of his entire sector. Hurtgen Forest was a natural weapon. Its dense foliage, steep ridges, and frozen streams created both obstacles and opportunities. For the Germans, movement was constrained, forcing patrols into predictable patterns. For the sniper, these same limitations were advantages. Snow-muffled footsteps, masking approach routes, frosted trees bent under the weight of ice, occasionally snapping, but providing concealment if the sniper timed his position changes carefully. Fog and drifting snow created visual distortions that challenged optics, but offered cover for a patient observer. Understanding environmental dynamics was as important as understanding the rifle. The sniper accounted for wind deflection, temperature-related, changes in powder burn, and bullet drop across uneven terrain. Even the slope of a hillside could alter trajectory subtly, and each miscalculation could reveal his position. By integrating environmental mastery with human patience and mechanical ingenuity, he turned a hostile forest into a controlled battlefield. The interplay of terrain, weather, and adaptive thinking created a theater where one man could disrupt the enemy without direct confrontation. German patrols vanished, not because of sheer firepower, but because they were outmaneuvered by a combination of skill, invention, and deep understanding of the environment. From an observational standpoint, this sniper operated almost like a ghost within the forest. The wrong side scope, inverted and unconventional, became a visual metaphor for his approach. Unconventional, hidden, and deadly precise. The German soldiers never saw him coming. They only felt the consequences. Each missing patrol became part of the legend. Whispers spread among American troops of a man who could strike without warning, who bent physics and circumstance to his will. This human tactical environmental synergy created a psychological pressure, as real as any bullet, demonstrating that ingenuity in combat can be as effective as brute force. The wrong side scope was more than a makeshift tool. It was a statement of adaptability under technological failure. Conventional sniping doctrine relied on functional optics, stable mounts, and clear sight lines. In Hurtgen Forest, none of these could be guaranteed. Cold weather froze lubricants, damaged lenses, and caused rifles to jam at critical moments. By inverting the damaged scope and recalibrating it through repeated testing, the sniper converted a limitation into an asset. The scope's parallax. Errors became predictable once mastered, allowing him to estimate range and trajectory without conventional reference points. This simple technological improvisation gave him an edge over German patrols who assumed that a broken rifle meant harmlessness. In a broader context, the innovation highlighted the role of field-level adaptation in modern warfare. High command could provide doctrine, supplies, and training manuals, but success often depended on the ingenuity of a single individual confronted with circumstances that no textbook could anticipate. The wrong side scope became a tangible example of turning adversity into tactical advantage, emphasizing the human-technology interface in combat. Leadership in the Hurtgen Forest wasn't only exercised by officers giving orders, it was demonstrated in quiet, improvisational influence. The sniper's example inspired fellow soldiers. Seeing patrols vanish without warning instilled confidence, and encouraged them to embrace adaptive thinking in the field. Squad leaders and platoon commanders observed that even a single innovative soldier could shift operational dynamics. The sniper's ability to protect key trails allowed small units to maneuver more freely, conserve ammunition, and maintain morale under punishing conditions. This form of decentralized leadership, leading by example rather than directive, amplified the effectiveness of entire companies. Even higher command recognized the strategic implications. When reports described unexplained German casualties and disrupted reconnaissance, officers noted the role of ingenuity in force multiplication. The sniper's actions underscored that leadership in war is not solely about issuing orders, but about demonstrating initiative, resilience, and tactical creativity. The most profound impact of the wrong side scope may have been psychological. German patrols moving through the forest began to vanish without explanation. Rumors circulated among troops of an unseen marksman capable of striking anywhere, creating hesitation and fear that slowed movement and eroded confidence. This effect illustrates a timeless principle. The human mind can be manipulated as effectively as a machine gun. A single soldier, through skill and ingenuity, imposed uncertainty on the enemy. Fear became a tactical tool. Patrols altered their routes, slowed their pace, and sometimes abandoned reconnaissance entirely. The sniper weaponized perception, making the forest itself feel hostile and unpredictable. Morale among American troops improved in parallel. Witnessing the sniper's effectiveness gave them hope that survival was possible, even when supplies, reinforcements, and conventional weapons seemed insufficient. In a campaign defined by cold, exhaustion, and isolation, psychological victories were just as critical as physical ones. Human patience, environmental mastery, tactical acumen, technological improvisation, leadership by example, and psychological manipulation all converged in the sniper's operation. Each angle reinforced the others. Patience amplified tactical opportunities. Mastery of terrain magnified the effect of improvisation. Psychological pressure enhanced the operational impact. The wrong side scope became a symbol not of brute force, but of synthesis, a small innovation leveraged across multiple domains to produce outsized effects. German patrols vanished, but more importantly, the story highlighted how complexity, adaptability, and observation could turn adversity into control. This multi-angle perspective establishes the stage for the climax, turning point, where the sniper's ingenuity would face its ultimate test. Every patrol, every tree line, every frozen trail became a proving ground for skill, resolve, and adaptation. The perfect setup for the decisive moment to come. December 19th, 1944. Hurtgen Forest. The snow fell steadily, coating broken branches and frozen undergrowth in a thick, white blanket. Visibility was low, yet movement betrayed life. German patrols probing the American lines, confident in the cover of dense woods. The sniper, hidden behind a ridge and camouflaged with brush, adjusted the inverted scope on his rifle, checking the alignment once again. Each calibration was a careful dance between instinct and calculation. A single misjudged angle could expose him. Through the mist, he observed a four-man German patrol, moving methodically along a narrow trail. His first target was the point man, the scout whose job was to detect ambushes and relay information back to the squad. One careful squeeze of the trigger, a muted crack echoing briefly in the trees, and the scout collapsed silently. The others froze, confusion registering on their faces. He fired again, hitting the second soldier. The remaining two hesitated, unsure where the shots originated. His mastery of the wrong side scope allowed rapid, precise follow-up shots, despite the inverted optics. Each shot was calculated: distance, wind, angle, parallax. The patrol's formation disintegrated within moments, their momentum broken. They scattered into the underbrush, leaving their route unsecured. Nearby, American infantry observed in astonishment. The sniper's effectiveness was more than technical. It was psychological. Soldiers whispered of the ghost with a backward scope, unable to believe that one man could control the forest's movement. Confidence surged among the defenders. They repositioned, fortified weak points, and prepared for the next patrols, relying on the invisible advantage their comrade provided. The Germans regrouped farther along the trail, trying to assess the source of their losses. The sniper shifted slightly, mindful of snow-laden branches that could betray his position. From this new angle, he targeted the patrol leader, exposed momentarily while giving orders. Another shot, precise, silent, invisible, and the leader dropped. Panic rippled through the remaining soldiers, forcing a chaotic retreat. As the forest fell into temporary silence, the sniper maintained his vigil. Another patrol approached from the south, oblivious to the fate of their comrades. He adjusted for distance, wind gusts carrying through the trees, and fired in measured intervals. Each hit reinforced a pattern. German soldiers moved and vanished, without realizing the invisible barrier they confronted. In the tactical sense, his actions reshaped the battlefield. Trails once used freely were now avoided. Reconnaissance slowed, confidence fractured. Patrols were forced to reroute, slowing the German advance and buying time for American defensive repositioning. Each shot had immediate physical consequences, but the larger effect was psychological dominance. Nearby officers took note. Reports described unaccountable casualties and halted patrols. Command recognized that one soldier, employing ingenuity and precision, had created a choke point in the enemy's operations. The forest, once hostile and uncontrolled, became a controlled environment through adaptation, skill, and patience. The snow continued to fall, softening the sounds of movement, yet the sniper remained vigilant. Hours passed. Every approach, every rustle, every footprint in the snow became a potential target. The wrong-side scope, inverted and unconventional, had transformed from a makeshift fix into a decisive instrument. Its effectiveness was now undeniable. As dusk approached, a larger German patrol, 6 men with a light machine gun, attempted to advance along the same trail. The sniper, adjusting for the last rays of fading sunlight and the chill settling in his bones, prepared his shots with meticulous care. One by one, the patrol vanished into the forest, leaving their machine gun behind. The trail, once threatened, was now securely defended. By the end of the day, the sniper's position had determined the movement of multiple patrols, protected a vulnerable sector, and preserved lives on his side. The wrong-side scope had proven its worth, and the forest's invisible hand of control now belonged to a single, adaptive soldier. The night fell quietly, but the stage for the ultimate confrontation was set. German forces, unnerved and disrupted, would attempt another push at dawn. The sniper's ingenuity had bought time, but the coming day would test every lesson he had learned. Patience, observation, and precision. December 20th, 1944. Hurtgen Forest. Pre-dawn. The forest lay in muted darkness. Snow clung to every branch, muffling sound, yet movement stirred in the undergrowth. German forces, aware of previous patrol losses, advanced cautiously, trying to regain the initiative. The sniper, crouched in a hollowed-out trench beside a frozen tree stump, surveyed the approach. His wrong-side scope, crude and inverted, had become an extension of his senses. Every shadow, every silhouette, every shift in the snow was magnified through the lens of experience and invention. At 05:30 hours, a squad of 8 Germans entered his field of fire. They were equipped with a light machine gun and rifles, attempting to probe deeper into the American line. The sniper's breathing was steady, measured, almost imperceptible. His first shot struck the point man through a gap in the trees. The remaining soldiers paused, confusion spreading across their formation. He shifted aim rapidly, compensating for the cold and the angle, and neutralized the machine gunner. Chaos ensued. The Germans, unnerved by the invisible threat, scattered into the forest. Some slipped in snow, others hesitated, unsure where the next shot would come from. Every misstep reinforced the psychological dominance the sniper held over the sector. Patrols had learned a silent, deadly lesson. The forest was no longer neutral ground. Meanwhile, American infantry moved along parallel positions, observing the disruption. They advanced cautiously, using the delayed enemy movement to secure trenches, set up defensive lines, and evacuate wounded. The snipers' efforts had created both tactical and temporal advantages, allowing forces to operate under safer conditions while the enemy's confidence eroded. At 0800 hours, German command ordered a concentrated assault along the trail. This was no routine patrol, but a coordinated push, intended to flush out American positions. The sniper, understanding the stakes, repositioned to a higher ridge, leveraging tree cover and snowdrifts to remain concealed. From this new vantage, he could observe multiple approach routes. As the Germans advanced, he methodically eliminated targets at long range, each shot calculated with careful attention to wind, trajectory, and elevation. The wrong side scope, though unconventional, allowed him to strike with precision that surprised even the most experienced soldiers. By mid-morning, the advancing squad had been rendered ineffective, forced to retreat or take cover, leaving the trail behind them clear. The tactical consequences were profound. German reconnaissance was halted. Patrols were delayed or rerouted. American positions were fortified without engagement. One man, armed with an improvised sight and extraordinary patience, had dictated the flow of combat across a sector of the forest. As the afternoon progressed, the sniper continued to dominate the battlefield. Additional enemy patrols, unaware of his exact position, began to withdraw prematurely, fearing unseen threats. Even veteran German soldiers were unnerved, muttering of a ghost marksman whose shots struck with uncanny precision. The forest, already hostile, had become a theater controlled by adaptation, intuition, and ingenuity. By evening, snow fell again, coating the battlefield in silence. The sniper remained vigilant, knowing that German forces would attempt another approach at dawn. His rifle, inverted scope and all, had proven its worth beyond expectation. The wrong side scope was no longer an improvised fix. It was the decisive instrument in the defense of this sector, and a quiet legend was born. The forest seemed to exhale. Patrols vanished. Positions held. American forces had survived the day intact, owed in large part to one soldier's invention and unwavering patience. And while the larger battle raged across the Ardennes, this small, frozen battlefield had already been shaped, controlled, and defended by ingenuity. The next day would bring renewed action, but the turning point had been achieved. The invisible sniper had rewritten the rules of engagement, proving that even in the harshest conditions, a single mind and a rope-like adaptation could turn the tide. By December 21, 1944, the immediate threat along the trail had been neutralized, but the toll of combat and harsh winter conditions was evident everywhere. The snow, once a silent blanket, now bore footprints, bloodstains, and scattered equipment. American units, though still intact, were exhausted. Frostbite had taken hold of fingers and toes, and rations were low. The forest, silent for hours after the sniper's interventions, felt oppressive, as if it remembered the bloodshed and the ingenuity that had determined its temporary control. The sniper's rifle, with its inverted scope, became the quiet centerpiece of this success. Though crude and improvised, it had allowed him to dominate multiple enemy patrols with minimal ammunition. Soldiers who witnessed its effects recounted the near-miraculous precision and the sudden disappearance of enemy squads. Commanders, recognizing the tactical advantage, repositioned troops to leverage the sniper's control of the sector. In many ways, the rifle had become a force multiplier, extending the reach and impact of a single man across the forest. German forces were visibly shaken. Patrols slowed, rerouted, or abandoned reconnaissance entirely. Reports described units hesitating to traverse trails once considered routine, delaying the larger offensive timetable. The psychological impact of the invisible sniper was as significant as the physical effect. Fear became a tactical weapon, eroding the confidence of even seasoned soldiers. American infantry units, now better positioned thanks to the sniper's influence, began repairing damaged defensive works. Foxholes were reinforced, trails mined or blocked, and communication lines restored. Medics moved through the lines, attending to frostbitten and wounded soldiers. The forest, once a perilous expanse favoring the enemy's approach, had been partially tamed by human ingenuity, discipline, and improvisation. For the sniper himself, the aftermath was quiet, almost anticlimactic. His rifle had performed beyond expectation, yet it bore the marks of relentless use. The inverted scope had strained the mount, and metal stress had begun to warp the barrel slightly. Despite this, he remained vigilant, anticipating further German attempts to probe the line. His success was not celebrated with fanfare. It was measured in the absence of enemy patrols and the safe repositioning of Allied units. Stories of his effectiveness spread among American soldiers. Whispers of the wrong side scope created a sense of awe and respect, a quiet legend that traveled along the forest line. Yet there was no official recognition. Field reports referred vaguely to an expert marksman controlling enemy movement. The true ingenuity of the adaptation, the inversion of the scope, remained known only to those who had observed it firsthand. The immediate tactical advantage also had operational implications. By controlling the key trails and slowing German reconnaissance, the sniper allowed American commanders to redistribute forces, concentrate artillery, and reinforce vulnerable sectors. Casualties were minimized where his interventions had taken effect, and supply lines, still fragile and threatened by weather, remained largely intact. As the day ended, the forest was silent once more. German patrols had ceased advancing in the area, and American positions were fortified. The sniper, hidden in his concealed position, cleaned and prepared his rifle, mindful of the cold and the possibility of renewed engagement. His actions had not only preserved lives, but also reshaped the flow of combat across this critical sector. In these hours, Hurtgen Forest was no longer merely a battlefield. It was a laboratory of adaptation, endurance, and human ingenuity. The wrong side scope, a simple improvisation, had proven that survival and tactical success could depend as much on invention as on firepower. The forest, frozen and unforgiving, had yielded to the quiet brilliance of one soldier's mind. In the days following the decisive engagements, Hurtgen Forest began to reveal the lasting consequences of both combat and ingenuity. German forces, unnerved by the invisible sniper, slowed their operations in the sector. Patrols were rerouted, supply movements delayed, and reconnaissance largely abandoned. Commanders at higher levels took note. The forest was no longer neutral territory. It had been subtly, but decisively, controlled by an individual acting at the edge of conventional doctrine. American units benefited from this unexpected advantage. Troop movements became safer. Artillery positions could be adjusted with greater confidence, and reinforcement convoys reached their destinations with fewer disruptions. The psychological relief among soldiers was palpable. Knowing that someone maintained an invisible but effective presence in the forest renewed their sense of security, even amidst freezing temperatures and relentless snow. The rifle itself, now legendary among those who saw it in action, became a symbol of field-level innovation. Though the inverted scope was primitive and unorthodox, it had demonstrated that human creativity could compensate for equipment failures, environmental challenges, and overwhelming odds. Reports from other sectors began to include accounts of improvised adaptations, inspired by stories of a soldier who had made enemy patrols vanish. Beyond immediate tactical impact, the sniper's actions offered a broader lesson in resilience and improvisation. Officers recognized that flexibility, observation, and ingenuity could multiply the effectiveness of limited resources. The forest's terrain, once considered a liability, became an advantage in the hands of a soldier who understood both environment and human behavior. The wrong-side scope exemplified the principle that war was as much a battle of minds as of firepower. The legend of the invisible sniper spread quietly among troops. Soldiers recounted how patrols disappeared without warning, how the forest seemed alive with unseen eyes. These accounts were never formalized in reports or commendations, yet they influenced morale and doctrine. Troops learned to value adaptability, patience, and precision as much as traditional training. The psychological effect on the enemy was equally significant. German soldiers were now wary, hesitant, and distrustful of even minor movements in the snow-laden forest. For the sniper himself, the aftermath was a mixture of satisfaction and quiet vigilance. His rifle, though functional, had endured weeks of abuse. The inverted scope showed wear, and its mount was stressed. Yet, he continued to occupy concealed positions, maintaining observation over critical trails and ensuring that enemy patrols remained disrupted. His contribution, though invisible to most, shaped the operational outcome for the sector. Over the long term, Hurtgen Forest became a study in adaptability and human ingenuity. Military historians would later examine these engagements, emphasizing that innovation at the individual level could have strategic impact. The sniper's rope-like adaptation of his broken scope became a metaphor, a reminder that the smallest interventions, when executed with skill and precision, could influence the larger flow of battle. Even as the forest thawed in spring, remnants of the engagements remained. Abandoned equipment, footprints frozen in snow, and splintered trees told a story of endurance and adaptation. The sniper's legend persisted, not through formal recognition, but through memory, in whispered stories, in the respect of comrades, and in the invisible mark left upon the forest. In the end, the aftermath of the engagement demonstrated a profound truth. Victory in war is not solely measured in numbers or firepower. It is shaped by those who adapt, innovate, and act decisively when circumstances demand more than doctrine. In Hurtgen Forest, the wrong-side scope was proof that one mind, one improvisation, and one soldier's determination could shape the course of a battlefield. War is often measured in grand battles, famous generals, and decisive offensives. Yet, its essence frequently lies in moments of quiet ingenuity, where survival and success depend on adaptability rather than numbers. The story of the wrong-side scope exemplifies this truth. A broken rifle, inverted and improvised, became an instrument of control, shaping both terrain and the enemy's behavior through precision, patience, and creativity. The sniper's achievement was not in heroics or spectacle, but in understanding that limitations could be transformed into advantages. By mastering the unforgiving forest, observing enemy patterns, and leveraging a damaged tool, he created a psychological and tactical effect that extended far beyond a single patrol. German forces hesitated, retreated, and rerouted because one mind had found a way to impose order on chaos. This moment underscores a broader principle of warfare and human resilience. Ingenuity is often more decisive than force alone. The forest, the weather, and equipment failures were obstacles, yet they became catalysts for invention. The sniper's adaptation illustrates how individual initiative, combined with skill and situational awareness, can alter outcomes on a scale far larger than any single man's size or rank might suggest. Beyond the battlefield, the wrong-side scope is a metaphor for human creativity under pressure. It reminds us that survival often depends on the courage to experiment, the patience to refine, and the vision to see opportunity where others see only failure. In the cold, silent woods of Hurtgen, one soldier's quiet brilliance reshaped the landscape of fear and control, leaving a legacy that transcended the immediate tactical victory. Ultimately, the story of the sniper is a story of humanity in extremis, of minds unbroken by circumstance, of tools transformed by necessity, and of the subtle ways innovation can shape history. Bastogne and Hurtgen forests were defined not only by armies and artillery, but by the ingenuity of individuals who refused to accept limitation. The wrong side scope stands as a testament to that enduring truth.